Hello, welcome to the Pit Stop Podcast. I'm Braydon Dowler-Coltman. I'm joined, as always, by Jordan Dowler-Coltman. We had a really fun race last weekend, and what was
Circuit of Paul Ricard.
That's right, and we've got an exciting race upcoming this weekend in Austria. The first of two races at the RedBull Ring this Sunday. We had our first practice this morning, and lots of fun stuff to talk about. Here we go. All right, we had a great race, French Grand Prix last weekend. We had a battle between Red Bull and Mercedes, as we have been seeing for most of the season this year. What's really exciting this year, I think, is that we're really now starting to see Mercedes having to push to be the best car, and we're really starting to see that Red Bull is emerging as the fastest vehicle on the grid. Not as well. We didn't see any yellow flags. We didn't see any red flags. The excitement still continued at the race. Jordan, what were your thoughts on the race last weekend?
Yeah, as you said, another head-to-head battle. We have the two guys who are the two heavyweights this year, duking it out, race in and race out. Obviously, both of them found Azerbaijan a little more frustrating than in previous seasons, as neither of them were able to score any points, both failing to get into the points. Obviously, a missed opportunity for Hamilton after Verstappen went out first, but he also had some issues. So they were both looking to bounce back in France, and they did. Obviously, Verstappen holding him off. It was a very tight race all the way to the end. Hamilton led for most of the way, but Verstappen and the Red Bull team, I think, kind of got their revenge for Barcelona with a little bit better strategy, and they kind of undercut the Mercedes and forced Hamilton to go long on older tires, and they simply didn't have the pace once Verstappen was ready to make his move. But not only for those two drivers, but both for those two teams, a great weekend for both of them. Unfortunately for Mercedes, Bottas finishing fourth, but Perez finds himself back on a podium for a second race in a row, this time in third place. So Red Bull has two podium finishes in France. So great weekend for them. Just overall another example of what we should expect the rest of the way. I think we're getting close to the point where Red Bull very quickly here could pull away and make this very hard for Lewis Hamilton to catch Verstappen in the driver's race, but we're still in the thick of it. It could turn around very quickly here, and that's what we'll be looking for this week. And of course, this week we're in race 2 of 3 in a row. So we get 3 back-to-back race weekends for the first time this season, and that should also mean that with a little bit less time in between, the teams are going to be making a few more sort of drastic changes without as much time to sort of engineer in between. So it should be interesting to see what they do. And there's a lot of teams, I think, who are frustrated with France that will be looking to bounce back.
Why do you say that?
Well, I think we talked even last show about expectations for Ferrari have gone right up this season because they've been performing well. Well, they did not perform well last week. They really struggled, and so did Aston Martin.
Well, ninth and 10th.
So definitely further down than both of them would be hoping for. And the Ferraris, were only one of them was in the points. So, neither of them were. Sainz just missing the points. He was in 11th. So both missing the points last week. They're going to look for a bounce back. The other team outside of the top two we've been talking about all season, I think, is the by far and away third team right now. And I think it will be a fight to see who can catch them. But I really have been impressed with the McLarens and obviously Lando Norris, who I if I'm not mistaken, I think is third. Maybe Perez has caught him now, but third in the Drivers' Championship. I mean, Norris has been driving out of his mind. And last week, he had Ricciardo right there with him. They finished 5th and 6th. So, to have only 3 teams in the top 6 is pretty impressive when you consider that means that both drivers are driving to the maximum of what those cars are capable of.
It still feels though like Ricciardo's not quite happy with his performance. Would you concur?
Yeah, we talked about it at the very beginning. It's hard to be jumping into a new team regardless, and he's now this is his third team in 4 or 5 years. So I think there's a lot of adjusting that happens for everyone who jumps in there. Different drivers, I think, adapt better. We've obviously Perez has done great in the Red Bull, and I think Ricciardo for most of the season so far has looked pretty comfortable. But yeah, he's had a few moments where it just hasn't been there for them. But the McLarens, I think, also are very happy with the performance of their car on these more traditional circuits. So last week at the Circuit Paul Ricard traditional F1 circuit, wider space for some overtakes, a few nice tight turns, but mostly it moves. It's not like the city circuits where you kind of have to really be, riding the brake through the corners. The McLarens really seem to have excelled on these kind of courses, and they're going to get 2 more shots at it here, as we're going to be in Austria for 2 weeks at the RedBull Ring. So they have potential to again have a good couple weeks.
And each race, we're starting to see more and more the strategies that come into play for a successful race. It's not just Lewis or Verstappen, putting the pedal to the metal and whoever ends up at the end wins. But we did see that a little bit last week, in that Lewis was on a set of tires and he had 1 stop, and we saw Verstappen take a quick 2-stop approach, and he was able to, had there been 2 or 3 laps less, we would have seen a different result there at the top. But
and I think following the mistake for Lewis in Azerbaijan with the braking issue, I think it compounds the frustration for that team that the week after, it's sort of a strategic error that costs them the top of the podium and costs Lewis those very valuable points. So
this is what I want to talk about. So we heard outwardly from Valtteri Bottas in race at the end how frustrated he was with the team, and so why does that happen in the race? Obviously they're making adjustments and strategy changes during the race, but why do they not plan for that ahead of time?
Well, they do. I mean, they have several strategies. You'll often hear on radio drivers or engineers sort of say, we're sticking with plan A, or we're going to move to plan D or C or whatever it is, because they've gamed out based on what they expect their car's performance to be and what they, the simulations that they run based on other teams' performances. They have a whole bunch of sort of algorithms constantly crunching the numbers based on where they are and all those things. But obviously a race being a very fluid thing changes second to second. And so they're constantly recalculating those things. They're trying to identify, the tire performance on a specific day is going to be different than another day, right? So the conditions may slightly adjust things. I think that was part of, going into that. A lot of teams expected that to be a one-stop race. Well, if a lot of teams expect to do that, the teams who choose to do something different are going to either have a great advantage or a disadvantage depending on all those factors. In this case, Red Bull, I think, very quickly realized they had an opportunity for the undercut. They took advantage of it, and it paid off for them. Much like I said earlier, Mercedes got them doing the exact same thing in Barcelona, where they had an analyst going through the numbers, and we actually have seen there's a YouTube video dedicated to sort of the radio calls during that race, and you can hear the Mercedes team very quickly, within a matter of laps, identify an opportunity that had presented itself mathematically based on the tire performance, based on all of those factors. They identified and recognized based on the pace of their car, if they pitted to faster tires, they would catch Verstappen at a specific point, and that's exactly what happened. I'm sure Red Bull had the exact same calculations lined up and ready to go, and that's what they took advantage of. Yeah. And the problem that occurred for Mercedes, they just didn't react fast enough. There was an opportunity there during Red Bull's outlap, following the pit stop for Lewis to come in and to try to do the exact same thing. And he may or may not have then been a bit more competitive to the end. I think you have to give Lewis some credit, even on those weaker tires. He managed to push that car to second place and survive much longer than some of those other guys who really fell off with the older tires. That's why you also sometimes see, like, down the table, you'll have teams who are really banking on a yellow or really banking on
catch up.
On a safety car to make their pit stop more valuable. And if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah. One last thought here on the race in France. Really great position for George Russell. Finished 12th. I think that's like the highest that Williams has finished in a year, 2 years, like a while.
Yeah, definitely a while. I mean, I think we're seeing the continued, exponential growth of George Russell as a driver. I don't think there's any question about that. A lot of rumors obviously flying that he'll have Valtteri Bottas' seat next year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that. The way he's driving, he's a future star, and with the right machine and the right opportunity, he'll definitely be competing one day for championships.
All right, well, that was the French Grand Prix, and on to the race this weekend in Austria.
Are you feeling hungry? Busy Bee Vegan is a plant-based meal prep service offering pre-made, delicious, and healthy plant-based meals to the Greater Toronto Area. Whether you're curious about plant-based vegan eating, looking to improve your overall health and wellness, or simply too busy to cook, Busy Bee is for you. Their plans are focused on eating clean without sacrificing taste and contributing to a healthy planet. They have made it super simple. Choose and order your meals from the multiple plans they offer, and they will deliver your meals in environmentally friendly compostable containers right to your door. You can find them on Instagram at Busy Bee Vegan Meals or on Facebook at Busy Bee Vegan. Go check out a small local business in Toronto and save the hassle of COVID grocery shopping and cooking. Let the Busy Bees feed you buzz-worthy meals.
All right, the Styrian Grand Prix. Or is it the Steiermark Grand Prix?
Like it's Steiermark, but
all right.
Either way,
we're
it's
going
at the RedBull Ring in Austria, home of RedBull Racing, and another classic European style circuit track where the pace is quick. We don't have raised curbs or anything. Guys are going to try to make some passes. We saw last year. I think we were here for 2, maybe even 3 races because of the whole COVID thing. It was one of the first tracks we went back to, and it's always fun. Like it's just one of those racetracks that can really test drivers. And if conditions get a little squirrely, you can get you just get really interesting racing.
If they get squirrely.
Like if it gets wet, or if there's a lot of wind,
or cold,
this is a tricky little course to navigate. You know what I mean? You're in the mountains, you've got some nice elevation points, a couple really cool turns, and then 2 or 3 real good straightaway spots depending on how it plays out, right? You start on a nice straightaway, so there's a good DRS zone down to turn 1, and then a little sort of curvy section between 1 and 2, and then a real tight turn at 2, and then the rest of it's a couple. I think there's only 9 turns altogether, so there's a lot of straight out driving, which is what's great. So
and we had practice this morning. Verstappen had fastest lap, I think. You were mentioning
yesterday. This will come out on Saturday.
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah.
It will be yesterday.
And technically, this will probably come out, and you'll have already watched qualifying. But regardless, worrying about the racing part, yes, Verstappen is fast.
Verstappen's hella fast. But Alpine, the Alpine vehicle is pardon the pun, motoring along. It's still moving fast. They're not quite getting the positioning they want, but there's a lot of steep competition in the field. What do you expect to see from Alpine this weekend?
I mean, they've kind of, they look a little bit like a new team in the sense that they're still figuring out some things. They're, week in and week out, things kind of shift for them. They have a really great week, and then they have sort of a down week or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. I've been really impressed all season long with Ocon. I thought I think he's been driving really, really well. And if you were to contrast him to some other drivers, maybe who have been with the teams that they're driving with, or maybe more established teams, it's actually definitely something, something to be looking for, and it's just really good.
So Valtteri Bottas had an interesting final practice. He spun out in the pit lane. That's a really unusual thing to see. Like, is he just mad? What's going on with Bottas?
Yeah, no, he's actually in trouble. He will, regardless of where he qualifies, on Saturday, he will lose 3 grid spots.
Regardless.
Yeah, that's the penalty. So whether he finishes first or he finishes 5th in qualifying, then he'll be bumped 3 spots back. So if you're chasing Valtteri Bottas during qualifying and you're within 3 spots, you're going to be better than wherever you finish. Basically they claim that he was at fault for leaving the pit in 2nd gear. Which is a dangerous maneuver, and then that's why he lost control of the vehicle. That was his driver error, and he could have hurt somebody. I mean, it was a full 360 almost, or I think it was almost a full 360 spin. I mean, very dangerous, and it's interesting because speaking of pits, we also will see some new technology being used in the pits this week for the first time. The FIA has implemented a new. I guess it's not like a rule change or like a mandate. It's basically just like a
formula.
Yeah. They've basically just said to all the teams that there's a new minimum time that the task of, removing the bolt and putting the bolt back on and tires on, there's a minimum amount of time that a human being should be able to do that. And any team that is pitting faster than that minimum amount of time, or having that task completed faster than that, must be doing something illegal, I suppose.
Okay.
They won't be penalized for it, but they're going to start tracking it and making sure that teams aren't kind of corner cutting. Things where they're triggering the light a second or a hundredth of a second faster than they should be. Things like that. It gets very technical very quickly, but it's more about just ensuring safety, because they always want to be. Everything in F1 is done right to the line, right? Mm-hmm. We're right at the edge of unsafe, because that's where the maximum amount of potential comes out of the speed of the car, speed of the pit stops, everything. We're dealing with hundredths of seconds, thousands of seconds that you've got to be right to the edge, but you've got to be safe too, and that's what they're worried about. So.
Well, they'll have their close eye on on Bottas and his exits, as well as the rest of the drivers in the pit lane. It's going to be a really fun race. What do you think? Who's going to finish in the podium?
Well, I hope we're going to see another battle of Lewis and Max. I think, like I said earlier, we are getting very close to the danger zone for Mercedes. If they can't kind of pull out of this couple races in a row where they've struggled, they're going to find themselves in a much harder final stretch of the season to try to get Lewis his record-breaking championship, and for them to continue their championship ways. And for Red Bull, this is the time to not let up. Now you have to take advantage of these two races in Austria and really, really push to widen the gap for Max's lead and for the teams as well. Definitely, those two teams will be hungry, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a very similar podium to last week. Maybe one of them doesn't have the race they're looking for, and we see something different. But everything, considered, and then look for McLaren to be up there again. That was the other one I would be expecting.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Verstappen and Perez are going to have a great race. Lewis, I predict, will finish first in this race, as he did last year. But it's bound to be good. This is not the Austrian Grand Prix. This is the Styrian Grand Prix. The Styrian Grand Prix at the RedBull Ring this Sunday, June 27th, 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's bound to be good. Quick housekeeping. We have the Turkey Grand Prix re-added to the 2021 calendar. It's going to replace the Singapore Grand Prix October 1st to 3rd. So just mark your calendars there and look forward to seeing a race there again in Turkey. And we'll be back next week. That was Pit Stop. The Pit Stop podcast is presented by HatTrick Sports and is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. The show is produced by Jordan and Braydon Dowler-Coltman each week, but mainly Jordan. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening.